Black Waitress helped an old man daily, until his attorneys showed up with 4 bodyguards. The morning rush at Riverstone Diner had just begun. Steam rose from coffee cups, the smell of toast filled the air, and the low hum of conversation echoed softly. Tasha Brooks, a young black waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile, moved from table to table, her apron slightly stained, but her spirit calm as ever. Then, the door opened, and everything stopped. 4 men in dark suits stepped inside, their movements synchronized, deliberate. Behind them walked a man in a gray pinstripe suit, polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. His presence shifted the room's energy entirely. Conversations fell silent. Even the sizzling from the kitchen seemed to fade. Every eye followed them as they approached the counter where Tasha stood frozen, coffee pot trembling slightly in her hand. The lead lawyer adjusted his tie and looked directly at her. "Miss Tasha Brooks?" he asked in a firm, formal tone. She nodded slowly, unsure what this was about. He opened his briefcase, removed a sealed ivory envelope, and placed it gently on the counter. "This was left for you by Mr. Malik Thompson." Her breath caught. The room seemed to blur around her. Malik Thompson, the quiet old man who used to sit at booth 7 every morning, ordering the same black coffee, leaving generous tips, and always thanking her by name, had passed away just a week ago. But why would his lawyers be here for her? As the men turned to leave, Tasha's fingers brushed the edge of the envelope.
Her name was written in Malik's delicate handwriting.
Inside that single envelope lay a secret that would change the course of her life forever. Her eyes glistened as a quiet thought crossed her mind. He remembered me, when no one else ever did. The memory began like a soft echo in Tasha's mind, the first time she ever met Mr. Malik Thompson. It was a slow Tuesday morning at the diner, sunlight spilling through the blinds, catching the steam rising off the coffee cups. He had come in alone, sitting by the window in his usual quiet way. Everyone else saw just another old man with tired eyes, but Tasha saw someone who carried stories. He ordered the same thing every day: black coffee, scrambled eggs, no toast. Never complained, never rushed. She would always ask, "How's your morning treating you, Mr. Thompson?" And he would smile faintly, replying, "Better now that someone asked." Over weeks, those brief exchanges turned into real conversations. Tasha learned he was a widower, living alone in a large but lonely house. She never knew his last name carried weight. Thompson, as in Thompson Dining Group, a nationwide chain of restaurants. To her, he was just Malik, the kind old man who once tipped her $20 just for remembering how he liked his coffee. Meanwhile, far across town, Malik's 2 children, Preston Wells and Rebecca Lang, lived in their own worlds of privilege. Preston managed corporate accounts from his penthouse office, while Rebecca spent her time at charity galas and social clubs. They rarely called, and when they did, it was usually to discuss money or estate matters. To them, their father's business legacy mattered more than the man himself. Tasha never judged them, but she noticed the loneliness in Malik's eyes when he mentioned their names. As his health began to decline, it was Tasha who noticed first, the way his hands shook, how he struggled to hold his cup some mornings. When she offered to walk him to his car one evening, he smiled and said softly, "You remind me of someone who used to care." Months later, when he stopped showing up, she feared the worst. Her heart confirmed it when she saw his photo in the newspaper obituary. Malik Thompson, founder and CEO of Thompson Dining Group, had passed away quietly in his sleep. Tasha attended the memorial in her modest uniform, standing quietly at the back while the city's elite mourned a man they barely knew. She did not belong there, or so she thought. No one noticed her, not Preston, not Rebecca, but she still whispered her goodbye. Days later, she was wiping down the counter at the diner when 2 lawyers and 4 bodyguards walked in. The same men from the memorial, the same sharp suits. One of them placed a card on the counter and said, "Ms. Brooks, Mr. Thompson requested your presence at the reading of his will." At the law office, the air was heavy with suspicion. Preston sat with his jaw clenched, Rebecca with a forced, icy smile. When the lawyer unfolded the final page, everyone leaned forward. "In recognition of her kindness, loyalty, and compassion," the lawyer read, "I hereby leave controlling ownership of Thompson Dining Group to Ms. Tasha Brooks." The silence was deafening. Preston's chair screeched as he stood up. "This is ridiculous. She's just a waitress, Rebecca added sharply. She manipulated him. This is fraud! The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. Tasha sat frozen, humiliation flooding her as the world questioned her worth. That night, alone in her tiny apartment, she stared at the company documents clutched in her trembling hands. Her name was printed beside Malik's signature. He believed in me, she thought, but belief would not be enough, because tomorrow the world would come for her crown, and she had no idea how to wear it. The next day, Tasha steps into the marble lobby of Thompson Dining Group headquarters, not as a waitress, but as its new owner. And the war for respect begins. When Tasha walked into Thompson Dining Group for the first time as its new owner, the room fell silent. Conversations stopped. Eyes followed her every step. The sound of her heels echoed in the marble lobby like a stranger's arrival at a place she was never meant to enter. At first, she tried to smile and greet everyone kindly, just like she did back at the diner. But this world was different. Here, kindness looked like weakness. The senior managers barely nodded. Some turned away as if she were invisible. In the following weeks, her name was printed on every office doorplate and company memo, but no one treated her like she belonged. When she called for meetings, people arrived late. When she spoke, others interrupted. When she gave directions, they were quietly ignored. Behind closed doors, Preston and Rebecca were already working on their plan. They could not believe that a waitress was running their father's empire. Preston transferred loyal employees to distant branches, replacing them with people he could control. Rebecca began feeding small lies to the media. The company is falling apart under Tasha Brooks's leadership, headlines soon read. They even manipulated the company's finances, hiding expenses and altering reports to make her look incompetent. Every small victory she tried to claim was quietly erased by their schemes. Still, a few people noticed her struggle, and one of them was Andre Bennett, a gray-haired manager who had worked beside Malik for 20 years. He often stayed late, helping Tasha understand balance sheets and supplier contracts. He spoke softly with patience, like a teacher guiding a student. Malik trusted you for a reason, he would say. Don't let them make you forget that. Another silent ally appeared in Daniel Ruiz, a sharp, observant HR director who understood how ugly corporate politics could get. One evening, after another painful meeting where the board mocked her ideas, Daniel found her alone in the hallway. You need to be careful, he warned. You're not just fighting for control, you're fighting for respect, and they'll never hand it to you willingly. Days turned into weeks of quiet cruelty. Whispers followed her everywhere. She doesn't belong here. She's just playing boss. Malik must have been losing his mind. In one board meeting, a senior executive spoke over her 5 times before she finally stopped talking altogether. Another time, when she entered the cafeteria, half the staff stood up and left mid-lunch. Someone even accidentally sent her an email thread mocking her speech and appearance. Tasha kept her head high, but at night, when the lights went out in Malik's old office, the weight crushed her. She sat in his leather chair, staring at the framed photo of him on the wall. Why me? She whispered. Why did you believe I could do this? Her voice broke as tears fell on the documents she had been too tired to read. That was when Andre walked in quietly, holding something in his hand, a small brass key. He looked around the room, lowered his voice, and said, Malik once told me something before he passed. He said, if anything ever happens to me, tell her to find the truth in the vault. Tasha frowned. The vault? Andre pointed to a painting on the wall, an oil portrait of Malik standing in front of his first restaurant. He meant this one, Andre said. Together they lifted the frame, revealing a small safe built into the wall. The brass key fit perfectly. When the lock clicked open, Tasha's hands trembled. Inside were stacks of folders, a small hard drive, and several USBs labeled in Malik's handwriting. They plugged one into the computer, and what they saw left them speechless. There were video recordings of private meetings where Preston and Rebecca discussed money laundering schemes, falsified charity donations, and even intentional discrimination against minority employees to protect the company image. Documents showed offshore accounts, fake contracts, and bribes to auditors. Malik had known all along. He had gathered the evidence but never acted on it, perhaps waiting for the right person to expose it. Tasha covered her mouth in shock. He knew, and he trusted me to find it. Andre nodded. He believed you would do what he couldn't. In that moment, something inside Tasha shifted. The fear that had once paralyzed her was gone. In its place was a calm, burning determination. She was done being silent. She closed the vault, locked it, and looked out the window at the city skyline glowing in the night. The war had already begun, but now she finally had the truth on her side. The next morning the office was still. Tasha stood by Malik's old desk, watching the sunrise spill across the papers. The calm before the storm, and she knew exactly what she had to do next. The next morning, Tasha carried a small black folder as she walked through the marble hallway of the Thompson Group headquarters. Her steps were steady now, not hesitant, not fearful. The vault's discovery had changed everything, but before she could act, she needed to make sure the evidence was real and strong enough to stand in front of the world. She called one man who once stood beside Malik through every legal battle, Jason Mendez, the company's former legal advisor. Jason was known for his integrity. He had retired a few years back, disgusted by the direction the company had taken after Malik's children took over. When he saw Tasha standing at his doorstep, he looked surprised, but not unkind. They sat in his quiet office filled with law books and dusty picture frames. Tasha laid the files and drives on his desk. "I found these in Malik's vault," she said softly. "I need to know if they're real, and if they can help me save what he built." Jason examined every file, every video, every document. Hours passed. The only sounds were the clicks of his pen and the hum of the ceiling fan. Finally, he leaned back and looked at her with quiet amazement. "He recorded everything," Jason said. "Bank transfers, hidden accounts, even private calls with Preston and Rebecca. This is not just proof. This is protection. Malik did this to make sure the company would never fall into the wrong hands." Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. Malik had trusted her with the truth, and now she finally understood why. Jason's voice was calm but firm. "If you use this wisely, you can expose them. But you need to be careful, Tasha. They'll try to destroy you before this ever reaches the public." She nodded. "I am not afraid anymore." That night marked the beginning of her preparation. Andre and Daniel joined her after work, staying late into the night. The office lights burned past midnight as papers scattered across the table. Financial ledgers, transaction trails, recordings carefully labeled. Tasha's hands moved steadily over the evidence, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. Andre watched her silently and finally smiled. "You look just like him right now," he said. Focused, unshakable. Days turned into weeks of quiet planning. Tasha mapped every step, rehearsing what needed to be shown and when. Daniel handled internal communications, ensuring that certain key investors would attend the upcoming board meeting. Jason helped her prepare the legal framing. Everything had to be flawless. Meanwhile, Preston and Rebecca were growing bolder. They thought she was about to quit. Preston even told the senior managers, "She's not built for this. Once she walks away, we'll sell the company and clean up the mess." Believing victory was near, Preston scheduled a major investor meeting, the one that would save Thompson Dining Group. Invitations were sent to board members, top investors, and even a few journalists who covered corporate affairs. When the email reached Tasha's inbox, she read it quietly and smiled. "Perfect timing," she whispered. On the day of the meeting, the conference hall shimmered with luxury. Glass walls, velvet chairs, and a massive Thompson Group logo glowing behind the podium. Cameras flashed as reporters took their seats. Preston stood at the front, dressed sharply, Rebecca by his side with a rehearsed smile. They looked confident, ready to announce that the company would soon be under new leadership. Tasha entered moments before it began. The whispers started immediately. Some people expected her to make a final emotional farewell. Preston leaned toward Rebecca and smirked. "She's about to embarrass herself one last time," he muttered. The meeting started with corporate formalities, financial updates, and investor greetings. Preston's voice carried across the room with practiced charm. "We're here today to finalize the next chapter of Thompson Dining Group's future." Then Tasha stood up. Calm, composed, her voice steady. "Before you sell what does not belong to you," she said, "there's something you all need to see." The room froze. Cameras turned. Preston blinked, confused. "Tasha, what are you doing?" She walked toward the screen at the front, holding a small flash drive between her fingers. "The truth," she said quietly. "The truth about what your father really left behind." And as she connected the drive, the lights dimmed and the first video began to play. The room fell silent as Malik's voice filled the speakers, clear, undeniable, and ready to shatter everything Preston and Rebecca thought they controlled. The room went completely silent as the video began to play. The sound of Malik Thompson's familiar voice filled the air, deep, calm, and commanding. "Preston, Rebecca, if you're watching this, it means I am gone," Malik said on the recording. His tone carried both disappointment and finality. "You may think the company belongs to you by birthright, but blood does not guarantee integrity. The future of this business should be led by someone who understands the value of every hand that built it. Someone who respects every worker, no matter where they come from." A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Tasha stood at the front of the room, her hands clasped, her eyes steady on the screen. Malik's voice continued, firm and resolute. "Preston, your greed will destroy everything I built. Rebecca, your arrogance blinds you to the people who keep this company alive. Neither of you are ready to lead, and that is why I made a different choice." The video cut off. A stunned silence followed. Preston's confident smirk faded instantly. Rebecca's face turned pale. Tasha clicked to the next file. This time, a video appeared from a company event months before Malik's death. It showed Rebecca in a private conversation, unaware of the recording, laughing with other executives. "We don't need to hire more of them," Rebecca said coldly. "They're not the face we want representing the brand." Gasps rippled through the investors. Several exchanged uneasy glances. The HR director sitting in the back lowered his head in shame. Before Preston could react, another video began playing. Preston in a heated call with an investor. "If we fake the quarterly numbers and make it look like a short-term spike, they'll never question where the money came from," he said. His voice was sharp, impatient. "Just make it happen." The investors started whispering, disbelief turning into anger. The journalists who had once written cruel headlines about Tasha now raised their cameras toward her. The once ignored waitress was standing in front of a room full of billionaires, exposing the heirs of the man she once served breakfast to. Tasha's voice cut through the noise, calm, unwavering. "Malik Thompson did not build this empire on greed," she said. "He built it on respect, something both of you forgot." Preston slammed his hand on the table. "This is manipulation! Those videos are fake!" he shouted. But Jason Mendez, standing near the back, stepped forward. "I authenticated every piece of evidence," Jason announced firmly. "These are real. Every recording, every document, verified and time-stamped. There is no doubt about their validity." Security guards moved subtly closer to Preston, sensing the tension. Rebecca began trembling, her voice breaking. "Please stop this. You can't do this to us. We're family." Tasha turned to her, her expression soft but resolute. "You had a family that loved you. You had everything, but you treated people like they were nothing. Malik gave you both a chance to build something greater, and you destroyed it." Rebecca lowered her face into her hands, sobbing quietly. Preston was not ready to give up. "You think investors will trust you? A waitress? This company was never yours." But before Tasha could answer, one of the senior investors stood up. An older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "She may not have your bloodline," the investor said, "but she has your father's values. And that's what this company needs." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Another investor added, "Malik's will left the company in her name. That's legally binding, and after what we've just seen, morally right." Preston's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," he shouted, but security stepped forward, blocking his path. Rebecca tried to follow, but the guards gently guided both of them out of the room as cameras flashed relentlessly. When the doors closed behind them, the silence was deafening. Tasha stood still, trying to process what had just happened. Andre placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he whispered. "He'd be proud of you." One of the journalists asked, "Miss Brooks, what will happen now?" Tasha turned toward the cameras, her expression steady, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "Now we rebuild. This company will stand for every person who was overlooked, every worker who was silenced. Malik Thompson believed in second chances, and I intend to honor that." The investors exchanged approving glances. Then one by one they raised their hands in a formal vote. The motion was clear and unanimous. Preston Wells and Rebecca Lang were removed from all leadership positions. When the vote was complete, the chairperson looked at Tasha. "Congratulations, Miss Brooks. By both the late Mr. Thompson's will and this board's decision, you are now the rightful CEO of Thompson Dining Group." Applause filled the room, slow at first, then stronger. Even those who once doubted her stood in respect. Tasha exhaled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The same media that had humiliated her now crowded around, asking questions, capturing the moment that would define her forever. She looked at the company's logo behind her, the same emblem she once served coffee under, and whispered softly, "Thank you, Malik. You never stopped believing in me." As the cameras continued flashing and security escorted Preston and Rebecca away, Tasha walked toward Malik's old office. The crowd's noise faded behind her. She opened the door quietly, stood by the window, and let the sunlight touch her face. The empire built on respect had finally found its rightful guardian. The fallout came quickly. Within days, every major news channel carried the story. Heirs of Thompson Group exposed for fraud and discrimination. Preston and Rebecca's faces flashed across screens nationwide. The same people who once praised them now turned away in disgust. Their investors withdrew, their friends disappeared, and their reputations collapsed overnight. Tasha watched the headlines from her office, not with pride, but with quiet relief. Justice had found its way, and she did not need to lift a hand in revenge. The truth had done it for her. Her first decision as CEO was simple but powerful. She reinstated every employee Preston and Rebecca had fired unfairly. Workers who had once feared walking into the building now stood proudly at their stations again. The atmosphere changed. Laughter returned to the hallways, smiles to the faces that once looked down in despair. Andre Bennett became her senior partner and closest advisor. His wisdom and loyalty kept the company grounded. Together, they reopened Malik's original diner, keeping its old sign and wooden counter, the place where everything began. Daniel Ruiz took charge of building new diversity and ethics programs in Malik's name. He worked side by side with Tasha to make sure no one in the company would ever feel invisible again. Posters around the headquarters now read, "Respect is the foundation. Equality is the future." Months passed, and the company thrived under Tasha's leadership. Profits returned, but more importantly, so did purpose. The workers no longer just served food, they served a legacy. One afternoon, when the world had finally grown quiet again, Tasha visited Malik Thompson's grave. The cemetery was peaceful, with tall oak trees swaying gently in the wind. She knelt by the stone and placed something beside it, his old diner coffee mug, the same one he used every morning. "I did it, Malik," she whispered. "Not because I wanted power, but because you believed I could do something good with it." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not from sadness. They were from gratitude. Standing up, she smiled softly and looked at the engraved words on his tombstone. Built with heart, led with honor. Later that evening, Tasha walked through the restaurant where she had once served tables and wiped counters. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, and the sound of happy chatter echoed across the room. Employees greeted her not as the boss, but as someone who understood them. As she walked past the same booth where Malik once sat, she paused for a moment and touched the back of the seat gently. Her voice carried softly, almost like a promise. "He saw in me what they never could, not a waitress, but a woman who refused to give up." She smiled, looking around the place that had once been her world. And with the warm glow of the diner lights surrounding her, the story came full circle. Sometimes kindness builds empires that power can never destroy.